Hey there YouTube, it's Jane. I am a watercolor artist and a teacher, and I have a new video for you. Past couple of weeks I did spend doing videos for YouTube that took me quite a long time to prepare, so I wanted to do something more chill today. I will tell you the topic of today's video in a second, but if you by any chance are new to my channel or you missed what I was doing during the past 5 weeks, I've been creating a watercolor mini-series that is supposed to show you the basics of a watercolor technique, from how to pick the new materials for the technique, through basic techniques and advanced techniques, up to watercolor tips and tricks and effects. So all that can be found on my channel. I put these 5 episodes of the series in one playlist and I will link it down below. I hope that the series has been helpful to you, mainly those that are starting with watercolor, but also to those that might have been using it for a while and have been maybe struggling. I will be referring back to the series when I talk about watercolor techniques in my future videos, so if you didn't check those episodes out, then you can do that anytime. If you want to experience a bit more in-depth learning through a video, then you can visit my Patreon. It's currently only a symbolic $1 a month. That will change in a couple of months, but for now it's like that, and every month I try to do a real-time video that is about an hour long, in which I paint something and talk you through the process. Last month it was a flower study in watercolor into a new sketchbook, and this month it was monochrome portrait study, so you can find that there. Topic of today's video will be following the series. It will be all about tips and my thoughts on how to learn a new painting skill. It's not just for watercolor painting, but in general, how to actually pick up a new skill, how to approach it. And I'm gonna tell you some of my experiences from my studio and my own live workshops where I teach watercolor to beginners for a couple of years every single weekend, up until the pandemic closed us down. So that's the ground and where I'm coming from, and not just my personal learning experience, which is another ground that is very important to me. And the painting you see me create on my screen is something that I painted into my Strathmore watercolor sketchbook a couple of months ago, I believe. And I'm not gonna mention a whole much about the technique that I used or my approach and thoughts. They can be found on my Patreon. My focus with this painting was not the face, but rather clothing pattern that I used negative painting technique for. So how to learn a new painting technique? Well, the purpose of this video will be to give you some motivation to start and break the ice, but also to give you a mental picture of what the learning process might look like, and that by itself should help you to move through it and come to its very end successfully. I am not a psychologist, obviously, but one thing that I noticed almost immediately after I started to teach, that people generally do understand how learning occurs, and that skills need to be taught and that people are not born with them. People do understand that they teach their own kids, their own friends, and even their parents. A good example might be teaching an older parent how to use their email, or teaching a kid in the kitchen how to use a particular tool. Sometimes I learn from my friends how to cook a new recipe. Generally how it goes is they explain a theory, then I go and get the ingredients for it, then I do the trying in my kitchen, then something goes wrong, then I go back to the friend and ask them, they give me advice, I try again, and until I successfully created the food that I wanted. The learning process is not a mystery to people, but when it comes to drawing or painting, people often ask one question: isn't it just for those with talent? This way of thinking might just be one of the biggest problems and obstacles in achieving the goal that is to pick up a new painting or drawing skill. I'm not 100% sure if this is a global problem or just a local problem that occurs in my country with our particular mentality that goes around, that starts in school when they teach kids how to paint or draw, which basically in my country is usually just to assign them to paint something, but very rarely explaining how to actually do it. That might even partially maybe lead to people assuming that if they can't do it, then they are not talented and therefore not destined to ever learn it. The way I look at the drawing and painting is that it's a skill, just like any other skill, like driving a car or learning a new recipe. It needs to be taught and it requires some discipline, some practice. It won't come to you through a theoretical explanation. It will require trying over and over and over again with some theoretical knowledge, of course, that helps to speed the process. And naturally, some people will pick it up sooner than others. And there are very few people that will pick it up extremely slowly, and that's what I also observed on my workshops, but it's like very few out of the hundreds. It is beyond my ability to tell you why that occurs with some people, very few people. I want to emphasize that. If it's the physical predispositions, but even those people can pick the drawing and painting skill up, but it takes a very long time and it is very painful for them. They usually give it up before some results occur, or they simply choose another painting technique that is more suitable for the physical predispositions. I did have a student, for example, that was, as he called it, heavy-handed, had a lot of other things going on creatively that were very interesting about his work. But the medium of watercolor, for example, did not really suit him the best. He was having the hardest time to control his brush, because watercolor, it really is the type of medium that requires delicacy and touching your paper softly. And even when painting on a larger format, he just couldn't achieve the water and the brush control that was required or was needed to be able to control the medium. And he did not lack the patience to try, but in the end he moved to paint more abstract, larger paintings on canvas with heavier paint that allowed him to express himself better and suit the physical predisposition better. That's just one example of how circumstances or things that are beyond our control can influence the learning process, but it happens rarely, and the rest, 99% of other people that does not have this particular specific problem with outside circumstances are perfectly capable of learning how to paint as well as how to draw. I can imagine that you will probably think that you are the 1% person that have the problems that others don't, and that you probably won't be able to learn it, but trust me, you probably are not, and you probably will. Just need to stick it up. And after you set a couple of mini goals and achieve them, then you will be able to go back and look at your beginnings and compare it and clearly see that you are able to learn, you are able to progress, and that should break the first mental barrier between you and learning the new painting skill. I already mentioned this in the last video of the mini-series, which was watercolor tips and tricks, that I do recommend to my students to create 10 paintings at first. And it might sound like, oh my gosh, 10 paintings, that's a lot. Well, it's not. And you really need to force yourself to do the first couple of paintings and that will help you to move further. This will be the hardest phase of the learning process. It's the start. The first phase of the learning process between the 0 paintings and the 10 paintings will be the toughest, just because you are still unfamiliar with everything that's going on. You've never done this in your life, and you will never be as confused as you are now. It is also uncomfortable feeling when something isn't going smoothly and when you feel like a failure, and that all is part of the learning process. You should expect that, and once you do, it will be easier for you. I suspect that the feelings of being a failure at the start of the learning process is why most people just leave it there and never move further, and then just find excuses of why that didn't work, why we didn't have time or didn't have the talent or something, just so that we don't have to deal with the feeling of being not great at something. But that's why the mini goal number 1 should be to complete 10 paintings. And don't judge your work and don't judge yourself until you are done with the 10. By the way, the number 10 is average. Some people will be fine with 7, and for some it needs to be 15. But good news is that if we are talking about watercolor, the painting itself doesn't take more than a couple of hours. I would say somewhere in the range of 1 hour to 3 hours tops. You don't really need more than a week to complete 10 paintings. And when you look at it, a week is a very short time to pick up a new skill. Or let's say that one watercolor painting is 2 hours on average. We are talking about studies. Then you will need 20 hours to move through this first phase. And that's doable. That's highly doable in a very short time. So what usually happens after you complete those 10 paintings is that 1 or 2 are definitely good enough for you to be happy with them, and then you can say that you have already achieved something that you are happy with, and you know now how it feels. You have the experience to complete a successful watercolor painting. Now people should really correct their expectations. It won't be 10 successful paintings. It more likely will be 2 or 3 successful paintings, and the rest will be failed attempts that will give you amazing experience, because every mistake that you did in those 7 failed attempts, you had the opportunity to correct or try another approach in your next study. So I'd say that the failed attempts are more valuable to you at this point than those successful paintings. I would not expect from those first 10 attempts to anything be sold or go straight to your wall, even though you might be very proud and frame the picture in the end. I just believe that properly and realistically set expectations at the start of the learning process are why many people either fail or continue learning. Another thing that can be tremendously helpful is that after you complete those 10 paintings, you should take notes and try to verbalize what is it exactly about certain successful paintings that makes them successful. What exactly you like about the painting or the technique or the way you applied the paint or the color combination. Just write it down. And I believe that in almost every attempt that you did, you will be able to find something that you consider being well done. And by the virtue of writing them down and making them very concrete and specific, you are basically training your brain to be strategic about the painting process or the drawing process, and it will more remind you of a regular skill learning than having the magic of being an artist happen. And do the same process with everything that you consider being a mistake in your studies. and write it down. Try to make it as specific as you can so that you can move on with a very clear idea about what defines a successful attempt. My personal experience with seeing how people go through this first phase of learning let me also observe like two groups of people that I would consider extremes. First extreme would be a person who asked tremendous amount of theoretical questions and with some, of course, good points, and tried to understand the technique theoretically, and then took a large amount of time to finish one painting or one study, and then stopped and analyzed that one painting for hours and hours. People like that often watch a great amount of videos that explain the technique from all kinds of angles before they pick the brush. It might take weeks or months. And then that particular type of person also often writes to me an email that is 3 pages long, or write messages to me every single day while they tackle the very first painting they work on. And my point with this approach to learning is that it is counterproductive. Mostly, not because it's bad to analyze or because it's bad to invest a lot of thought or time into a single piece of art or a single painting. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But because when first trying to pick something new, the mileage is also very important. This doesn't mean that you should not take enough care or pay enough attention to observing your own work and own process during those 2 average hours of creating a watercolor study, or that you should jump into it without any theoretical knowledge or watching a tutorial or have a professional explain to you the basics of a technique. But you should do some significant amount of work before trying to analyze and before starting to judge what you actually did, because it is extremely hard to say how well you did from a single painting. And I will often refuse to critique one single painting of any of the students that I have. I need at least a portfolio of 5 to 10 works to be able to say if there is a regular problem with the technique that occurs that we can address together. And if this is the way you tend to approach learning, then you will struggle, because it will take you so much time to realize that you are not improving, because learning a skill means to develop a muscle memory. Just like you can't make your abdominal muscles tight from watching a workout video, you have to go to the gym and use them regularly every single day to make them tight, and understanding the technique is just not enough. It's the same with painting. We also do have another extreme, and that's a person who basically works like a printer and paints a picture after picture after picture, never caring to slow down and think about the technique, or learning theoretically something about the technique, or to even analyze if the paintings lack something, if there is a technical problem, if there is something about the result that's not quite fulfilling us. And in this case, the learning stops before it starts. And one thing that dreads me about this development is that you don't even notice that you are not improving. I guess everyone is different, but when you watch out for those two extremes, there is a very good chance that you will learn the new skill, and not only that, but will continue learning and improving. Another thing I wanted to mention is the interval that I would recommend sticking with while going through the first learning phase, and that is you shouldn't take too long before completing it. If you, for example, paint one study that takes you 2 hours every single week, that is somewhat fine. But if you paint one study per month, let's say that you do a 2-hour-long painting session once a month, there is a very good chance that up until the next month, you will forget what you learned during the first month, and the interval between those two studies would be too large, too great for you to continuously join the experiences together and create one experience that will ultimately start your journey with the new skill. But if you are an organized person and are able to set aside a specific amount of time towards your practice every single day, the daily thing will help you the most and is the most efficient. It's a bit tricky with painting because you need to set up the table with the paint supplies, and it generally takes more time than, for example, drawing. So while for drawing practice and improvement, like 10 or 15 minutes a day is doable and also manageable. When it comes to painting, more manageable is like twice a week or 3 times a week. Most people that work and have the schedule during work days a bit tight might not have time up until the weekend, but if you can create a block of time during Saturday and also Sunday, that works. So don't wait too long before the painting number 1 and the painting number 10. And what exactly happens after you complete this first dreaded phase? Well, the learning becomes a bit easier, significantly easier, I would say. You become more confident and you will be more enthusiastic about starting a new painting. There won't be much resistance left, if any at all. The painting process will more likely generate much more joy for you. So the process usually continues with the middle phase, when you create a bunch of other paintings based on what you learn during the first phase and starting to show some preferences of your own. And the third phase, or at least that's how I tend to see this, is the process of you becoming a creator. And that might just be another topic for another video, but how I imagine it is to be able to then finally use the technique in a creative way and start to maybe change the rules a little bit and put things together in a different order and experiment with it. And this is creativity, which is quite different than learning the skill or the technique itself. And it doesn't even have to necessarily come in that order, like learning the technique first and then starting to be creative, although it was like that with me and it is like that with a lot of people that I teach. And a lot of people are creative without necessarily being bothered by any particular technique, and that's fine as well. In any case, my point is that after you go through the most difficult first phase, you create a solid ground for continuing, and it will never be as hard, not even if you stop creating or using the technique for a long period of time. By the way, thank you for paying attention to me, because I'm also learning a new skill, and that is to not ramble quite completely and express my thoughts in a different language that's my own, and that's very hard for me. So give me a break if you did not quite follow the train of my thoughts. I will get better with practice. That's what I'm counting on. My expectations are realistic, and just wish me luck. I will practice regularly, more like every single week, when I upload a new video for you. My painting is also finished, as it seems. The last golden and pearlescent embellishments by Finetech metallic paints are already dry, and I hope that you enjoyed the video, that it gave you some insight. Just let me know in the comments if there's another topic that you'd like me to talk about in my future videos, and I will see you next week. Bye bye.